Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Annabelle Rincon, and I am one of your co-hosts today. I'm very happy to welcome you to the last Analytic Tableau user group before the summer break, because we will come back in September with a lot of nice speakers. So let me tell you what this Tableau user group is a little bit unique. It's an user group dedicated to learning all about analytics in Tableau. The original plan was to meet every 6 or 8 weeks, but since January, we met every month, and we had awesome speakers who show you different analytic functions across the Tableau platform. So we are very proud of that. You can watch all recordings all the time in the YouTube channel. I will put them on the chat later. And we have also a forum page where you have, in the Tableau forum page, where you have like a lot of materials, the speakers material, and also the recording. Here is, in case you haven't really subscribed yet, you can use this QR code to subscribe to your other group, and you will receive each time the invitation. So about us. So I'm very lucky to do this Tableau user group with Sedal. Sedal is an analyst, is a desktop specialist, a Tableau feature author, and is also like a very involved member on the Community Equity Task Force. Obviously, he's passionate about data and Tableau, and he found his home in the data fame. So when not visiting or hanging out with the community, obviously, Sedal is like you see, I say obviously because you see the picture, right? It's like a wine aficionados. So wine aficionados, and they're talking about sport. I'm sure that he's drinking wine and watch sports at the same time. We have to clear
Absolutely.
Yes, myself, I am leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for a Swiss bank. I love baking, I love chocolate, and I love my dog. And I'm living in Switzerland. I'm also co-leading another initiative called Data Plus Women in Zurich. So the ground rule for today, it's very simple. The only rule is that you enjoy. Like we said, the session is being recorded. If you have any question, please use the Q&A because it's easier for us to monitor it. If you just want to say hello, where you are coming from, or like the temperature in your area, please use the chat box. So question, Q&A, chat box for saying hello and some comments. And please don't hesitate to send some love to your speaker in social media, or tagging them directly or using the hashtag analytics. Now it's time for me to let Sedal introduce the nice agenda that we have for today. And I wish you a very good session. Bye.
Thank you, Annabelle. Also, thank you all for indulging me and letting me know about the weather. Looks like it's 111 in Seattle, which is insane. My favorite, of course, was someone from Portland said hotter than biscuits, and I think a lot of us can agree with that. It's really warm across the country and across the world. Today we've got a really exciting group of people. Zainab, who I was just telling beforehand, is one of the pages I follow quite a bit, though we've never met. I feel like we're like best friends because I follow her content a lot, and she's done a lot of great work. She's doing a topic called Ban Your Dashboards. I will let her reveal what bans are if you're not familiar. And then Simon Beaumont is going to follow that up with a talk on why reference lines should be your best friend. Which I think is another really exciting topic. And then as we do very often, we've got some folks from Tableau here to tell you what's going on with the latest update and some exciting features to talk about. So we'll go ahead and start with our first speaker. Zainab is, as I mentioned, on Twitter at Zizzy_data, so you can follow her there. She is a Tableau Public Ambassador, a featured author, 2-time Viz of the Day, and a data scientist at Spotify, which I don't know about you, but that is one of the coolest jobs I've ever heard of. She's a data scientist. She's working in tech, turning business problems into data questions and answers, and answers those questions with analytics and data viz, which is exciting and something we all want to do. When she's not working, she's watching food shows. She's participating in challenges, and is also a great co-host because she reminded me that we want to let Simon go first. As first. So I've already done her, but I will come back to Zainab. So we go to the next slide and make sure Simon gets a chance to go earlier. Simon is a Zen Master social ambassador and JLL's global BI director. If you're not familiar, JLL is has a ton of people very active in the community, and he gets to be their BI director. I don't think he put in the bio, but I also note if anyone remembers Iron Viz last year, he was one of the finalists, along with a coworker also from JLL. Simon's been using Tableau for 6 years, is really interested in the intersections of sports and Tableau. He's a co-lead for Sports Viz Sunday, if you're familiar with that challenge, and unites members with a passion for sports and vizzing through weekly vizzes, which we really enjoy. He does a lot of really cool things. So if you're not following him, definitely check out his Twitter profile. And his topic is going to be why reference lines should be your Tableau BFF. So with that, I'll let Simon kick us off.
Thank you, Sadell. Can you just confirm when you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So welcome everyone. And who needs Tableau conference when you've got 1,000 people on the analytics tug? I'm fairly overwhelmed in terms of having 1,000 people on a tug. So it's awesome to be able to speak to you all today, and thank you for the invite. So I will be sharing a presentation. For me, there are so many things you can do in Tableau that you may not realize you can do, and you underutilize them as a result. And for me, reference lines and reference bands are a prime example of that. I think over the last year or two, as JLL have challenged me and the team to become more advanced in analytics, I've used reference lines more and more to find creative ways to achieve what I want to do without complex calculations or without complex scaffolding. So on today's talk, I'm not going to necessarily go through the basics of reference lines, although I will give you a couple of community initiatives and community web pages for you to go and find out about reference lines if you're new to them. But I just wanted to give you 5 or 6 use cases for how I do reference lines and some of the quirky things that I do with them in terms of trying to achieve. This presentation is on my Tableau public profile, and I always do that with my presentations just so hopefully they're accessible to everyone. So if you wanted to, you can jump onto my Tableau public profile page, and you should notice, as long as I've done it right, that you can download that from my profile there, and you can access it for yourself and be able to interact with it. But that's enough of me explaining reference lines and about the talk. Let's jump in and actually show you some Tableau and show you how it's done. So just to start with, if you did want to get some basics about reference lines, there's a ton of material out there. So I've just pulled out 3 or 4 examples. Interworks talk about adding different reference lines in Tableaus, a really good kind of walkthrough of all the different trend lines, constant lines, polynomial lines, reference bands, etc. You've then got Anna Ford, who did a really good take, and Anna's called the Stats Ninja for a reason. She did a really good take and explanation on when averages mean something you don't. And I think that's another really important part of reference lines is you can use them in many ways, but actually you need confidence to understand that when you're talking about a mean or a median, you know what it means and you know what it's doing, whether or not it's doing it at a pain level or a table level or a cell level. So I'd thoroughly recommend checking out Anna's blog post for that. And then the last two blog posts probably don't need much explanation or introduction to people on this call. The Data School is very well renowned for being outstanding in Tableau. It's run by the Information Lab in London. And they recently did some blog posts about how to create diagonal reference lines in Tableau. And that link is to part 1, which you can access part 2. And then he also did some really cool stuff about dynamic reference lines and colors in scatter plots. And I will touch on a little bit of that today in terms of dynamic plots as well. So those are just some basic resources. There's tons on Tableau's website just to help you get started with reference lines. But I'm going to jump in and give you some of my use cases and do that through vizzes that I've already done. So in 2020, as Sadell was kind enough to say, and thank you for doing so, I had the pleasure of winning one of the IronViz feeders, or the IronViz feeder, and being in the top 3 to participate on the virtual stage. It was probably one of the biggest honors of my Tableau life. Slightly scary, I would have to say, in terms of it, but for anyone that is still going through their viz, a massive, massive good luck. Please do finish it. You will have a great time if you get in the top 3. I promise you it's not that scary once you're there, and it will be a memory of a lifetime. But when I did my IronViz feeder, I did a scatter chart, and that scatter chart looked at the Human Development Index. And as part of that, I wanted to link it to democracies. And across the world, there is a democracy index that ranks how free and democratic countries are. And the scale runs between 0 and 10. Now, you'll notice on here, which is the live example, and I'll jump into it in a minute, you've got the scatter that has already got some color on there. So I've already done some clustering analysis to be able to say which countries are some of the highest in terms of the Human Development Index, the middle and the lowest. So that's the scale between 0 and 1. But the scale between 0 and 10 is the scale for the democratic or the democracy index. And I wanted to be able to pull out some key numbers there because there are categories to be able to look at full, flawed, hybrid, and authoritarian regimes. So I actually used reference lines on the top of the scatter to be able to categorize and group up the work. And that uses the very most basic of reference lines. So I'm just going to go in now and show you what that is. So I'm going to remove a couple of them to start and just show you. So this is really kind of reference line 101s, but that's the basic scatter out of the box. So you've just got 2 axes, a load of points there. So if you want to drop a line on to the democratic index, so just be aware which axes you're dropping it onto. You'll now see it drops down here a constant, and I can just edit that, change that to 4, and it shows the reference line. That's brilliant, but it's showing the word number 4, it's showing a label of 4, and it's kind of like, well, you already know that because it's against the axes. So make sure when you're first applying your reference line to also think about the formatting. So I would recommend, unless you want the label to show, don't show it. Do you really need the tooltip? Because quite often when you hover over a viz, you can get quite a large amount of cognitive load in terms of you get tooltips all over the place. So just think about, does the tooltip add any value? And in this instance, it doesn't. And you can then also just think about how you format the line. But in this instance, I'm going to leave it as just a single line. So that was one reference line for 4. Just be aware you can add as many reference lines as you want to a chart, and they don't add much overhead in terms of the line when you're loading it. So if you wondered, well, how did I get all of the reference lines in terms of the 4, 6, 8, and 10? It wasn't rocket science, you can probably guess it by now. I just added in 1, 2, 3, 4 reference lines. So I'll do the 4th, I'll set that as 10, and then I'll just quickly remove the label and the tooltip. So that's created that sectioning or that grouping of the data to be able to say, hey, I've got a scatter chart, and be aware there is some grouping in the data that I want to be able to pull out because it's relevant to my story and my analysis. But I would argue when you go to that unlabeled view, yes, you're pulling out, or I was pulling out 4, 6, 8, and 10, but what did it actually tell me to my end user? Did it help them understand the story, or did I have to assume they knew what 4, 6, 8, and 10 were? So I then wanted to take it one step further, and this was all done again via a single reference line. So you'll notice this time I'm talking about using reference lines to still show the line, but I'm adding this time a single label. And the single label, remember when I added it first time, it showed the numerical value. It doesn't need to. You've got a plethora of options when you do the formatting to be able to choose what kind of label you want. And again, this is just about taking it one step further and customizing it. I know you could add floating text boxes. Yeah, you could, but as soon as the data becomes dynamic, the risk is those floating text boxes move in relation to the data. So how do you add the label when it is just embedded in the data and embedded in the reference line? So I simply added the same constants line, but this time if you edit the line, when you choose label, instead of choosing value, which would show the numerical number, I this time chose custom. And what that does is it unhides a little pop-up box to the side where you can type in anything you want. So in this instance, I typed in hybrid regimes and I clicked OK. And that's where you get the ability to show a reference line, but also show a label. And I did that for all 4. And what you'll notice is I formatted as well the labels to always be the bottom left. So I created, if you like, this segment of this box is the full democracies, this box is the flawed democracies, these are the hybrid regimes, and these are the authoritarian regimes. And to do that, simply right click on the reference line, and this time you want to go to format. And now, in addition to be able to do the edit menu, which allows you to specify what you want the label to show, when you do formatting, you can also choose where you want the label to appear. So just with anything in Tableau, you can center align it, you can left align it, you can bottom align it, top it, in relation this time to the reference lines. So all of that's customizable along with the font. The only thing I would say is by default, Tableau sets the shading of any label to 50%. And that's fine when you've got color underneath it, but sometimes you don't want any shading, you just want the clarity of, I want it to be the same color as my background. So just set the shading to 0 so you don't get any border around or any kind of box around. So if I just go up to say 64 and do a color, you can see you can also get shading around the word, and it nicely curtails it to just fill the word. But in this instance, I didn't want it. So when you are using reference lines, not just to show reference lines, but also to show labels, just be aware, in addition to just saying what you want the label to be, you've also got the ability to format it to really create that clean visual and reduce the visual complexity. So when we did the single label, that's the creation we've got. But I would still take it one step further and say you're calling it, or I'm calling it flawed democracies, hybrid regimes, but I wanted to add some context. So how do you create double labels? So this now allows you to see the overall banner name of the democracy type or category, but I've also added in the subcontext in a different font of a democracy index and saying what the index range is. So for the full democracies underneath, it says 8 to 10. Now this is where I have to show some vulnerability and say this isn't some fancy voodoo magic with level of details or any calculation expressions. It's just a secondary reference line. So what I'm going to do here is go in and show you, I promise you it's not magic. So that's your main reference line for the 10. So actually the way I got around it by wanting to do the nested labels, all I created was a second reference line with a value of 9.7. So it was 0.3 offset from the main line. But I then hid the line. So from an end user's perspective, they don't need to know that there is a hidden line there. They just think that's a really nice formatted label, and how the hell did you get a bold number followed by a subcontext number in Tableau, because you can't click enter on a reference line. So don't worry about, will someone find your hidden secret, because from an end user point of view, it doesn't matter. So all that this one is a separate reference line. So in theory, there are 8 reference lines on this sheet. It's set to 0.3 below the main one, and you'll see that I've just called it a separate custom label, and on the font I've just given it a smaller font and not bold. So it's just creating that added layer of how do you make it as easy as possible for your end users to engage with your data. And when I did my InViz feeder, that was a real thing that was core to my center in terms of my design choices. I didn't want to necessarily go fancy. I just wanted to say, how do I add value to make it as easy as possible for the user to see and understand their data, which is what Tableau is all about. And thankfully for me, it was successful. So that's your double labels. And if you wanted to remember how to do any of that, as I say, just go into the Tableau public workbook, download it, go into the worksheet, and you can reverse engineer it to your heart's content. But then we also move on to labeling for stacked bar labels. So one of the things I regularly do at work is a stacked bar. But we all know on Tableau, when you do stacked bars, if you show the label on the stacked bars, they label the individual segment of the stacked bar, which is fine, but sometimes you just want to show the overall number. Now, the way that I always used to do that was by doing a dual axes, making that dual, synchronizing the axes, hiding the axes, and I'm going to regret doing this live in a minute, but dropping the color index out and then showing the marks label. And what that will then do is, if I drop out the reference line, which is the way I'm going to show you in a minute, you will then eventually, if I drop in country onto label, and then I label it to the right, you can get your label to the right-hand side. And then all I'd want to do is bring the stacked bar to the top so I can show the label. But that's quite a lot of clicks to be able to get through to that. You're all of a sudden adding a dual axes, you're having to synchronize, you're having to hide the axes, you're having to remember which one's on top to show the tooltip. So there's quite a lot of added complexity. So I'm just going to show you an alternative way of doing it. So I'm going to take the viz back to where we were. So actually this time you'll see at the right hand side, I've got a stacked bar, but I'm also showing the label of how many countries are in that region. Well, how is that done? It's actually a reference line. So what I'm going to do this time is take the reference line out and repeat it from scratch. So I'm going to drop a constant line onto the table. And I'm just going to create a number just so I can see the line. Now I'm then going to edit the line, and I'm going to make this per cell, and I'm going to make it total. And what you're then doing is, for every cell, which in this instance is a row, you are creating a reference line that is the total of the number of countries in that row, which is exactly the same as the dual axes. So if I then hide the tooltip and I hide the line, the minute you'll see the label is defaulted to computation. So you're seeing the word total, which means nothing to the end user. If you go custom, you can then show the value, and if you want to, you can then put a space and type countries in, so all of a sudden at the end of the stacked bar, you've got the ability to label just the end with the total value. And hopefully that will save you, I would suggest, about 7 to 8 clicks every time you want to do it, if you want to label the end of a stacked bar. just to go back, that's what you're achieving there. And I've tried to explain it as best as I can in the text to the left-hand side of the chart. So if you do want to reverse engineer it, you can. But if you've got any questions at the end, just reach out and shout, and I'll share my details as well. So then the last scenarios are about some continuous data, some date axes. So we all know in Tableau that when you put date axes on, you've got the ability to be able to edit the date axes. So I'm just going to do this and show the header. And you'll see here at the bottom, that's your default Tableau date axes, which when we do edit axes, we know we've got the ability to change the start time, change the start date, the end date, and also the tick marks. So when you're changing the tick marks, you can say, hey, I only want to see every year, or I don't want to see any tick marks at all. Or maybe I want to see every third month. Now that's great, but it's not particularly dynamic because it's always linked to the start point. So what happens if you just want to show the first data point on your line chart and the last data point in your line chart to signify an axis, but it starts on date A and it finishes on date B? Well, again, probably you might have guessed it because of the subject of the talk, but you can use reference lines to do that. So in this instance, I'm going to hide the normal default Tableau axes. And I'm going to drop the reference lines out and we're going to show you it from scratch. So that's a bog standard chart with no axes showing. So on this one, if I then drop a constant line in over the date, the order date field, and go edit, I'm going to set it to minimum. And the reason I'm going to set it to minimum is then anytime the data changes or I filter it, the data label will automatically change. And again, using the same trick as I did last time, this time I want to show the value and I don't want a tooltip and I don't want a line. But also make sure you untick the show recalculated line for highlighted selections, because otherwise when you click a line, it will change the reference line to that line, which is great if you want to be able to show the point you've selected. And there are numerous use cases for that, but in this instance, I don't. So I'm just going to untick that. So what you've now noticed is I'm starting to create the illusion of a date axis without actually there being a date axis shown on the chart. So if I now want to show the maximum, I just drop a second constant line over order date, edit that line and go maximum order date, and again show the value and hide the tooltip and untick recalculated. And what you've then created is the illusion of a far simpler date axis that will dynamically update with any of your data. And I may live to regret this because I haven't actually tested it. So I'm going to change it from copiers to envelopes. And you'll then notice, thankfully it works, that the data now changes and the date axis now say the 13th of the 1st, 2018 through to the 23rd of December, 2021. So as you change your data, that then changes to be able to reflect your date range, and it creates a dynamic date axis, but with no points in between. Now, I'm not suggesting you'll do that for every business dashboard, because most times people will find it useful to be able to see the points in between, but it might just be a really nice use case. And a lot of this, I have to say, in my early journeys with Tableau, I was massively inspired by Ryan Sleeper. Ryan's a previous Tableau Zen master who leads Playfair data. And his raison d'etre when it comes to Tableau is about less is more. How do you simplify the viz to make it as easy to understand as possible? And that's where I've learned some of these techniques about remove some of the complexity of the ink on the page, and it makes it far easier for people to be able to understand their data. So that's where we've got the illusion of, hey, you've got a date axis, but how did you only show 2 points that were nicely the min and max? Well, you do it via reference lines. And before I go on to the most complex one, because I've left that from last, hopefully so that I can remember how to do it properly and not lose you all, but I also wanted to show how to use reference bands this time to be able to highlight data. So this was a viz, or a tooltip actually, from a recent collaboration which I did with CJ Mays. And CJ, I have to say, is one of my idols in Tableau. What he can do with Tableau at the minute when it comes to radials or beautiful designs or technical layering, I think is probably up there with what anyone can do. If you want an example of that, just check out his Roger Federer Iron Viz feeder, and I'll thoroughly recommend it as an example of kind of good design and good storytelling. But what CJ and I want to do is I'm not a Man United fan, just for anyone else, but we looked at Man United's performance in the Premier League this year. And we had a point on the chart where you could hover over any month and show the league table. So this here is simply a league table that we've created in Tableau, but we challenged ourselves to say, well, how do we highlight where Manchester United are on the table? And we don't just want to highlight it by changing the text. We want to actually highlight the band, or the band that is Manchester United. So you'll notice that this is a continuous axis, and that's really important because for this technique, it has to be continuous. So what we've got is Manchester United in second place. So we said to ourselves, well, how do we create a nice band that's equally sized, just above, just below, so it creates the illusion that we're highlighting Manchester United? So what you'll notice is in the data, we created two calculations. One that says if the team is Manchester United, then do the position plus 0.5. And for those of you that are eagle-eyed, you'll notice there's a top line, and this time we minus 0.5. So what you've got is Manchester United are in second, and in theory, you've got a value that says 1.5 and a value that says 2.5. And for those of you that are awake, you'll notice the gap between the two will be 1. So what we then do, and I'm just going to drop this out, is we then create a reference band this time. Now you can do it with 2 lines, but you are doing some redundancy if you do it with 2 lines. So this time I'm just going to drop the reference band over position. And you'll see at the minute, well, hang on a minute, it highlights 1 to 20, it's the whole viz. But remember, you've got the Manchester United bottom and top. So I'm just going to select the top line, and I'm going to select the bottom line. And I'm going to hide the labels, hide the tooltips, untick the show recalculated, and then you can choose whatever color you want to highlight, but it creates the illusion that you've actually chosen to highlight Manchester United, and it does it dynamically. There's no fixed borders or anything like that. So as soon as I change the month to a different month, you'll see then that the Manchester United row dynamically updates with a highlighting based on the reference band. And that, for some of the stuff that CJ and I did in the viz, that was probably one of our proudest moments of how do you create that clean highlighting without doing some complex table, and it's just using reference bands. So you'll see here, obviously I've changed the months, so the blue bit's in the wrong window, so I'll just move that down. But that's where the reference band is. And then the last one that I'll leave you with is a bit of a complex one, but I see this so often, particularly in business dashboards. So when you've got some date axes, imagine you've got 2 charts, and for some reason you can't make those charts in one sheet. So they've got one section, then they've got another section, so they've got to be separate charts. And in this instance, I've done it with copier sales and with envelope sales. So they're 2 different types of sales, but they're 2 different sheets. Now, if I just do what the dashboard or the data would do by default, you will see that by filtering on copiers, if I go to the order date, it ranges from the 22nd of February 2018 through to the 3rd of March 2022. And that's just the default date period of what Tableau sets in terms of the date range. If I go then to the second chart, you'll notice it's close, but it is a different date range all of a sudden. So if you then tried to layer one chart above another, if you then tried to compare the dates or points across the two charts, you would find it very difficult to, because that point there on the first chart is not the same date as the second chart. So the way around it, and sorry, I know I keep saying it, is reference lines. So if you go in and actually create some calculated fields, and these are level of details, but they're very simple level of details. So if you do fixed max order date and you do fixed min order date, in theory you are calculating the maximum and minimum points of your date range. And because you're not filtering using a context filter, that stays as the overall data. And then if you drop those two on the marks card in details, they don't show up on the chart. But what it allows you to do is actually find the reference line and insert a reference line using that minimum order date. So that start order date. And then the same again for the max using the end order date. And then if you add that to both charts, what you'll see is the dates become perfectly aligned. So all of a sudden you don't have to worry about, well, I could show this, but it's slightly misleading. You don't have to force yourself to have it in one sheet and compromise on the aesthetics in terms of the sectioning of your dashboard. You can keep them as two sheets, but automatically ensure that the dates align simply by adding a reference line across both. So those are my use cases. There are hundreds more, but I only had limited time today, so I didn't want to take the full 2 hours and give you all of them. But I would always encourage you, just try it out in Tableau, because all of those are relatively simple to achieve out the box, but you wouldn't know that they were able to be achieved until you've tried it. And literally the only way that me and my team found it out is by trial and error and experimentation. And that is some of those powerful ways of learning Tableau and extending your use case. So I just wanted to say thank you to Annabelle, to Sadale, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you did want to reach out, you've got my Twitter handle there, my LinkedIn profile, my blog post, and my Tableau public site. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'd love to be able to connect in the future.
Great, thank you, Simon. This is really helpful. I mean, you can see in the chat there, lots of people found this really interesting and found a lot of the things you offered to be super useful. As with your talk, there are lots of questions, so I'm not going to get to all of them. And then, Simon, if you have a second to look through the Q&A and answer maybe some of the follow-ups, that would be great. But I'm going to start at some of the top ones. And others, if you have questions you see that you like and you like them, they float to the top. Just an FYI for everyone attending. So a couple of ones that did get a few likes. Can you touch on the data source you used for the democracy index?
I could if I could remember, because it was a year and a bit ago now. So I believe, I'll tell you what I'll do is, if that person, if you are on Twitter or LinkedIn, ping me a message. There is a publicly available data source. So I think, bear with us 2 seconds, and I think if I go in, see index. So Democracy Index is something that's run every year by The Economist. So if you click on it, you can see here, it was last done in 2020. And you can actually download the free report, and there are interactive graphs on The Economist. But the lovely thing is it's got all of the history as well, so you can see how it changed. And that's just The Economist's take on democracy, because it takes into account freedom, voting, oppression. But I found it a really interesting data set to complement the health and well-being of a country.
Awesome. And yeah, that gives people a way to locate it. One that's a little bit specific to these to reference lines, but I think you may have some good insight here. is there's a few people that are newer to Tableau and interested in all the different kind of calculations and formulas that you've put in some of your business. Is there any good place you would recommend they go to sort of see some of the commonly used formulas or common calculations that they may be able to draw on?
Yeah, so I would recommend one person's video or vlog site, which is Tableau Tim's. Tim Negreno does some amazing jobs of not only showcasing new functionality for every Tableau release, but he's got some absolutely outstanding videos about how to explain and showcase how to do calculations ranging from the very basic up to the most complex. And I personally find it far easier to follow a how-to guide when it's a video compared to written text. It's just what's intrinsically kind of inbuilt in me. So I would thoroughly recommend checking out Tim's YouTube site. Just search Tableau Tim, and you'll probably need about 2 weeks to get through it all, but you will get a large amount of data there. There's also Andy Kriebel. Just follow his Tableau Public site, and he has got so many examples on Tableau Public of how to do level of details, how to do complex calculations and simple calculations. And then I would just encourage any of the Tableau ambassadors and Zen masters, just follow their blog posts, because most of what they're writing about isn't kind of up there rocket science stuff. Some of it is, but a lot of it is just sharing knowledge and experience of what they've learned. And I promise you, all of my journey in Tableau, I've learned from the community. None of it is learned because I've found out to do it in Tableau. All of it is inspired by others. So don't be afraid. Andy Cockgreaves said it best, feel like an artist. Just go on and find how others have done it and reverse engineer it for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wanted to double down on the video idea. Because I find as well, reading helps you memorize the steps perhaps, but I think it's more active when you can see someone actually doing it in real time and can even trace their steps. Andy Kriebel also has a YouTube channel in addition to Tim, and he does a lot of really great work and does some tutorials. So I would highly recommend both of those. And thank you for sharing, Simon. Maybe one more just so we can keep moving. There was one I thought that was really interesting. Oh, it's jumped up. It's interesting to me and to others. Can the reference band solution, the they were talking about, the one that highlighted menu, can that be used to highlight more than one row? And can it be used to highlight not just the visualized part, but also the dimensions in the row content? So like maybe multiple dimensions.
Yeah, so yes, it can be used to highlight multiple rows. So remember, at the minute in my calculation, so I'm probably going to live to regret this, but I'm going to give it a go. So the minute I put the Man United bottom and top, and if I go into the Man United bottom line, you'll see here it says, if the text is Manchester United, there is nothing to stop you creating another formula for a different team like Brighton or Fulham, and dropping that into there, and then dropping a second reference band onto the viz. Remember, that's the whole beauty of reference line and bands. You're not limited to one. You could drop as many on the viz as you wanted within reason, as long as it tells your analytical story. So if I did want to create, that's how these lines are created here. That's just a reference line at 17.5. So you could drop as many on as you wanted, and as long as, remember, that Man United bit as well doesn't necessarily need to be driven via a hard-coded string. You could link it to a parameter where you could select the viz or select the team you wanted to highlight. So yes, absolutely, you can show multiple. And in terms of the dimensions, in my use case here, I've only ever tried it with a continuous axis down the left-hand side, because if it's discrete, you wouldn't necessarily be able to add a reference line. The reference line would repeat across each discrete dimension. So I do think in this instance, it's important that it is continuous. You could do it with discrete, but it would be way more complex in terms of you'd have to have a dummy continuous one after the discrete dimension. And personally, I'm just not sure of the value of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Glenn brought up something that I was going to try in private, but want to bring it up because I think it could be useful. He's saying even with your if calculation, you may be able to use or logic or even and logic if it's full. I will caution people who maybe don't do a lot of Boolean, is that's going to be a really easy one to have break on you and you not know why. So I would just make sure that you are clear on what your logic is supposed to say, especially if you start using ands and ors in the same one, because I find the trick with a lot of those sorts of calculations.
Couldn't agree more. And just be wary if you do the or, just remember with a reference band, all you are defining is the minimum value and the maximum value. So if you had two teams in there, one that was at 6 and one was at 9, it wouldn't highlight the 6th team and the 9th team. It would highlight the band between 6 and 9. So that's why there would have to be separate reference bands if you wanted them discrete to highlight the 6th and the 9th.
Yeah, that's totally right. Cool. Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate the time. Like I said, there's plenty of questions. If you are around, me and Annabelle will also be trying to work through some of them as well. All right. Here, let me share. To still, just even though I sort of messed it up, I want to make sure that Zainab gets a proper introduction before her presentation. So appreciate you both for switching out a little bit. But Zainab, as I mentioned, at Zizzy_data, and still recommend you follow her on Twitter, is still a Tableau public ambassador, featured author, 2 times Biz of the Day. Again, has one of, I think, all of our dream jobs as a data scientist for Spotify. And as a data science, she turns business problems into data questions, and she uses visualization to answer them in analytics. She's also really involved in community challenges, Makeover Monday, Iron Quest, real world fake data, which I think has actually been sunset. If I remember correctly, I saw a LinkedIn post about that. But either way, many community challenges. Very active on Twitter. So I would, if you need to reach out to her, I think that's probably the best way, though I'll let her answer that, and is doing a presentation on banning your dashboards. Thank you for coming, Zainab.
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely, warm introduction. I'm just gonna share my screen and let me know when it's up.
Yep, we got it.
Lovely. So of course, Sidel has done a lovely introduction for me, and the title of my talk today is Ban Your Dashboard, but for some reason I ended up just putting big ass numbers on my title page. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about ban or big ass numbers, and if you prefer, the PG version is also, big aggregated numbers, and it's basically useful for summarizing your data, your metric, etc., into just one big number so that people would see it, and it's obvious, and you can use it to call out KPIs and important figures or stats on your dashboard. And so I'm just going to show some examples. The first example, I think if you're here, there's a good chance, I hope I'm right, that you've seen, I guess that you've seen a dashboard that looks like this. And this one is by Priya, and basically it's a dashboard showing, it's a business style dashboard showing KPIs about, across about 9 metrics, but she has used ban here. The big numbers that you can see are like a typical example of a ban, sort of, highlight the high level summary of all of the metrics. So you have the sales, the spend, etc. Really good example here. And I have an example by Andrew Kubel. Andrew Kubel's name has come up in Simon's talk. Yeah, so definitely recommend checking him out. It's amazing. And so this is another example where there's a couple of other information on the dashboard, about regions, category, etc. However, you can sort of see that the summarized version of what is going on is kind of obvious on top with the band, so you can instantly at a glance see the sales, the profit, and the total orders. So there's that. And the final example I sort of wanted to just say is that you can use ban in a business context and a non-business context. So this is more of an infographic style dashboard by Jyoti. I think it was actually Biz of the Day. And it was talking about podcasts, but it's packed with insight and information, but you can see some numbers that stand out to you and it's like, hey, I'm kind of important, like, look at me. So like she's used bands here to direct the users to say, okay, these are the things you care about on this dashboard. And this is a very effective way that you can also utilize bands in your dashboard or your visualization. So what are the elements of bands? And I'm going to be sort of talking more about business style, so more of a KPI band. Well, no surprise here that the most important thing or the first thing is the number, the actual number that you want to show and the figure. And sometimes, especially in a business context, is kind of important to also show a little bit of comparison. So do you want to compare it to last month, last year, etc., or you want to show a trend that something is, we are doing good or we are doing poor compared to a particular period. And so obviously the first thing you need to get or to work out is your data, and you can see like cute tenors here just like telling you, hey, this is important. So I'm just going to show that. So we want to show as simple as it is, just drag whatever data you want to show. In this case, I want to show sum of sales, and I just drag that into the text mark, and this is a number, right? But if we wanted to show for the most recent year, one way to do that could be just to use filters and just filter down to the most recent year and you get filtered. But if I wanted to see the previous year and I filter, the current year sort of disappears. And so one way that you can sort of show the previous year and the current year of a particular metric on a dashboard is by using something called a level of detail calculation, and or LODs for short. Basically, I mean, there's so many resources out there about like LODs and how Tableau sort of works through your calculation and your filtering. But this sort of short version of it is that LODs are not affected by the filtering in the view, depending on how you set it up. So I'm going to just show you an example. Sorry. So I've created a formula here that calculates, the current year sales. And before, this is the actual formula, but before going to the formula, let me just, go through the sort of the structure of a typical LOD. The first thing or the first identifier is obviously the quarterly bracelet. So anytime you see a calculation and you see the quarterly bracelet, you should probably want to think, table level, like data set level LOD. And fixed is a particular type of function. There are others, include, exclude, etc. But for this particular one, we'll be using fixed. And fixed is basically fixing whatever calculation you do and making sure that it's not affected. Or at least that's how I like to define it. So yeah, and you have a semicolon and you aggregate like whatever you want to aggregate. So it could be sum of something, mean, max, average, so any type of aggregation. And so coming back to the calculation. So here I'm basically saying, fix this calculation and sum. And inside the sum, I've actually put a condition here, and I'm saying that if the year, okay, so to do that, let me actually just show you what I mean instead of just talking. So I've dragged year onto the view, and you can see that we have 2017 up until 2020. I'm just going to drag this out for now. And so what this does is saying that if any of the year is equal to the maximum year, so it looks through like every level, then give us sales, which is what we want to sum. So then sum sales. And so when we do that and we drag the calculation, you can sort of see that it's constant across all the years. It doesn't change, which is kind of what we want. And one trick I like to do is to always double check. With data, you always want to double check. So you can drag the actual sales value into your view. And what you would see is that you can see that the most recent year, 733,000, is sort of what we have here, which is great. So the next thing we want to do is to get the previous year sales, which is exactly the same logic. But instead of comparing all the years to the maximum year, I'm comparing to the maximum year -1. So we have that, and we can also drag that here just to confirm. And so we can see that 609K is sort of the value for 2019, which is exactly what we want. And so now that we have the calculations, we can then start to build our band, or we have the data, which is the first element. So we want to show the current year sales, drag that onto the text. We want to show the previous year sales, drag that onto the text. And let's say we want to see the percentage difference, right? Because it makes sense to see how much more or how much less are we doing. So it's pretty much a simple formula. So you do current year minus previous year by the previous year sales. And I'm going to drag that to the view. And so we have this, which isn't, it's at the end of the day, it has all the elements that we want to see, but it's not looking anyhow. It doesn't really tell us much. It's kind of looking dead, if you will, which brings me to the second important element of your band, which is the design. So at the end of the day, with visualizing, you want to give people information in a way that is easy for them to digest. So design is very important. And for design, some of the things you want to look at for your band is how you format it, things like your type, your font type, the font weight, the colors you use, the spacing. You can even use shapes to just like jazz it up. These are all things that matter. So let's go back to what we had before and see how we can format it. So you can actually click on the text mark here to edit it. And the first thing, the most important thing, I guess, is, what are we talking about? So we are talking about sales. So you want to give it a title. And I'm going to make that slightly bigger. Now, the next thing is the big number that I want to show, which is the current year sales. And I'm just going to bring that up here. And we want to make it big because, what's the title? So we want to make it big. And so you can see I'm going for a heavier font type here, which is Tableau Bold. And while this is Tableau Book, which is kind of lighter. So I'm going to make that thicker and then bigger. Let's do 24. And for this, I like to go with a lighter font just because it's percentage. It's kind of less important and it doesn't distract from the main information. And so, yeah, when I click apply, we're starting to have something that, sort of makes sense. And we have this, but at the end of the day, we don't really need to see the actual previous year value. We can stick with the percentage, which I'm going to show how to format that into percentage in a bit. So we can stick to that for now and then click OK. So, and with a little bit of formatting, let's make that entire view. Oops, yeah. We have this, it's much better than where we were before. And so to change this into a percentage, you can actually come to the calculation here, click on format, and yeah, basically, just click on percentage, and yeah, and you can reduce the decimal place, which is nice. But instead of just showing 20%, right, you probably want to say something like, is it plus or minus? Is it going up or is it going down? So for still on the formatting, you can come to custom instead. And this is a little trick I learned from Andy, where you can actually edit the format. And so it's plus for the positive, and then you put a semicolon, and then you do minus. And so what you would see is that it shows plus when it's positive. And of course, this value is positive right now, but if you were it to be negative, it will actually show negative. So lovely, we have that. And I just want to edit the text here to put a little bit of extra information to say, this is versus the previous year. And yeah, that's sort of clearer. And yeah, we have that. The next thing is, this is actually quick and simple. Instead of the plus minus, you can actually edit the format and bring in your own shapes. So I'm sure you might have seen, this triangle up and down. You can to get these shapes, it's a Unicode shape. You can actually just do a quick Google search. It's very easy to get, and then just sort of put the shape that you want, and you have this lovely shape right there. The next thing that you might want to do is to color the shape. So you want it to show maybe blue or black when things are looking good, and you want it to show red when things are sort of not looking too well. And there are different ways to do this. But one way that I like to use is to create two calculations, and I'll tell you why. So I create a first calculation for when it's when the calculation is negative, and another one for when it's positive. So for when it's negative, I'm basically saying, if statement again, if the year-on-year sales is less than 0, then I put this shape because again, you can actually format with your calculation, but you can as well put like negative or anything you want there, since we've already formatted it already. But yeah, we have this. So you can say, let me actually just change that. So if it's less than 0, then negative, otherwise end. And then we have the other one for positive, the same logic. So you say if it's greater than 0, then you want the shape, otherwise, or you can put like positive, whatever, otherwise you end. So what you then want to do is to bring in those two calculations into the label that we were editing earlier and put them side by side, so that and then change the color. So for negative, you want the red, you can select a red, and for the positive, you want it to be a blue or a black, and then you can change the color. So what this does is that when the value is negative, it returns null. When it's positive, rather, it returns null for negative, so nothing shows up. And then when it's negative, it returns null for positive, so nothing shows up. But you have your color and your format, which is great. And to test that, I'm just going to negate this value. Please don't do this, it's not the right way to do your calculations, but just to see how it will look like. And I click apply. You'll see that the arrow has both changed direction and color, which means that's exactly what we want. So yeah, that's one way. And then the next thing, another sort of design for KPI, this I learned from, or I picked up from Luke Stein, is instead of using text, because texts are basic, we like buttons and like fancy objects, you can actually use this sort of rounded bar to to display your KPI object, depending on your dashboard and the design you want to do. And to view this KPI bar is actually pretty simple. I'm going to go through that. So one thing to say though is that it's not part of the original text. It's a different sheet on its own, just combined together. So how do we build that bar? There are a couple of different ways. The way I like to think about it is that the bar starts at 0 and you enter 1. So we're going to create a point for 0. I like to use average, but I think you can use mean as well. So average, and I'm just going to hit tab on my keyboard and click 0. And so we have the first point, and then we create another point for 1. Yeah, it's kind of looking like that right now. Not so much of a round bar. But the next thing is to drag this one. So to make it a dual axis, and to do that, you can drag this one over the axis for the 0, and you'll see this sort of equal to sign or dual axis sign, and that's the green light you need. And then drag that. And you can also remove the measure name. So when you drag that, Tableau automatically changes whatever you had into measure names and measure values, and you'd see all your measure values here. So we can drag out these measure names, and we have this bar. Change this mark into a line, and we can make that began. Yay, we have curved edges, which is what we want. And so let's just make this entire view so it's bigger. So we have that. We can hide the header. Let's make this way bigger. Lovely. So we have the bar. The next thing we can do is maybe to reduce the opacity, just so that it's clear. The next thing we want to do is to put the actual percentage or whatever in the middle of this bar. And I mean, of course, the sort of instinct, the thing that your instinct tells you to do is to just click on the show mark labels. But remember that we created 2 marks, so we have 0 and 1. So Tableau is thinking, actually, these are just 2 points connected by a line, so I don't recognize this line. So one way to do that is to figure out the middle of the line, which is 0.5, and create 1 more mark for 0.5. We can change that into a text type. Yep, and we can actually change the formatting of that. And then what would you want to show? We want to show the year-on-year sales. And you can make it dual axis and synchronize the axis. And we can, because it converts, so let's remove this measure names from the color label, lovely. And make that deeper. And yeah, basically that's what we have. We can format your, make it a custom or a percentage, just for simplicity's sake, we can keep that. But you can also make it custom, put your plus or your minus. And there we have it. The last thing that you want to do is to color this bar based on, whether, the trend is positive or negative. And to do that, you can create a condition again that says, if the value, which is year-on-year sales, is less than 0, basically the same logic, but here combined into one calculation. And then we have that, we can bring that onto the column. And so there we have it. You can hide your headers, format. Actually, a lot of it is just formatting. So format, just make sure you remove all the lines, all the grid lines and the 0 lines. And yep, that's it. And just to also show that, or to confirm that we have the right thing, I'm just going to tweak this, negate this value a bit to see what happens. Okay, right. So we have a different color, which is great. You can always edit the color by coming here. So nice. Let's go back to the actual calculation. And yeah, that's how you build something like this. You combine it with your text and you're good to go. Oh, another design that is kind of popular or that I've seen is by enclosing your bands in shapes. And to enclose your band in shapes, you can literally use different shapes. You can use circle, you can use square, you can use anything. And in this particular example on my screen, I actually have 2 shapes. So there's a filled circle and there's a circle that is not filled. And to do that, again, we want to create 2 shapes, so we need 2 points or 2 marks. So the first one is, I actually like using this average 0 because it just creates a point on the 0 line. It's sort of like a placeholder. And so for the second circle, we can also do that. So we have 2 points. All we need to do then is to change the shape. So for this one, we want it to be a circle. And for this one, we want it to be, let's use shape. And okay, it already defaults to the other circle, but yeah, we select it from here. And that's basically all we need. You can, make it dual axis. Always make sure to synchronize the axis and remove the default color. Yeah. Make the circles bigger if you will, so that it will fit your text, and you can also sort of change the size of the other one until you can see that that's way too much. And yeah, I guess I can live with that. And you can reduce the opacity of the inner circle. And this is basically all you need to sort of enclose your KPI in a shape. And then you probably want to show the label. So currently the label is showing 0 because we haven't told to our Tableau what we wanted to show. So we can drag the sales onto your label, which is the percentage difference. You can also drag the actual sales value, current year sales, into your label. Just a little bit of formatting, actually a lot of formatting, because half of this you'd find is formatting. And you would eventually have, you can put your title, rearrange stuff. Let's just do that and put a title. And yeah, we are good to go. You can make it bold, whatever you like. One thing I need to say though is you would notice that every time I've dragged year-on-year sales onto the view, I sort of go back to 0.2, which is sort of stressful to sort of recreate every time. So what you might want to do is instead of right-clicking here to sort of format, you can actually go directly into this side pane and right-click and go to default properties, change the number format, and basically use the same format that you would have done for if you had done it from the view. So we can just actually change this to -0% and remove the extra decimal places here and okay. And yeah, so every time we drag sales or year sales, that particular calculation into the view is always going to be the format that we have specified. So a little bit of razzle dazzle and formatting, and you eventually arrive at something like this. Yeah. The final sort of bonus, or this is not final, but it's like a bonus tip, is that one thing I didn't know or that took me time to figure out, very simple, is that you can actually just type in your values. Depending on the type of dashboard you're building, some dashboard you don't have to do like fancy calculations or anything. You can actually just click on any empty space here or create a calculated field. It depends. It's not always advised sometimes to click, but you can create a calculated field and text, and then just write anything that you want into it, P, or you can put a number, anything, and then drag that into your text mark, and you can just format as you will, and that's it. The other thing I was going to show that I was like, okay, yeah, you probably don't want to do that at work, or if other people are going to interact with your visualization, is you can actually just double click here and also just bring your text here and change that into a text mark, and you have that in your view. You can edit it as you like, you can change the font, etc. So that's that with some design. And the final element, which I feel like is like the god level element with bands, is that you can add function to it. So aside from just saying your bands, you can combine it with other charts, or you can add interactivity to it. You can make it interactive. And so let's start with the first one. How do you combine with other charts? Yeah, so you create a line chart or a bar chart, whatever, as you normally would, which we have done. But instead of using the title, the metric, the number that you want to show, instead of putting it as a label, what you want to do is drag it to your view as a detail and edit your title. So every worksheet has a title by default. I'm just going to reset this. So the default title is usually like the worksheet title, but hey, who knew you could actually edit it? So you can edit that, and since we have the metric that we want to show on your view, you can actually just insert and voila, and of course, like add your title. Again, with the formatting, it's kind of like a necessary evil. And yeah, so you can, you can make that small, make that big as you like. But I'm just going to, it's not wasting any time, I'm just going to paste the previous format that was there. And you would have that. Okay, moving on. So okay, I'm taking this point here, or a quick stop here. These are some of the things that we've gone through, some of the formatting styles we've looked at, some of the shapes that we've looked at, some of the another design where you can use shape, and like I said, you can use square, triangle, etc. And we've also seen that you could combine it. You can combine with other charts just to make it pretty and make it nice, and that you can also just actually type in your text and format it to get the required design that you like. And now for the last tip, or for the last band element function that I wanted to share, is you can make them interactive. So in this dashboard, when I click on profit, it automatically updates the other charts into a profit chart. And when I click on sales, it automatically updates to sales, which is pretty cool. So you don't just have fancy bands, they do something too. So how do we do that? What you would see here is that there's this sort of floating sheets on top of the actual sheet that we have. And I'll come to, and this sheet is actually where the magic happens. And behind the sheet is basically like, a title plus chart that we've looked at before. And so for the sheet, the actual magic is parameter actions. It's nothing too crazy, nothing too scary. So how do we sort of use parameter actions to drive or bring interactivity into your bands, which is the last thing I'm going to show here. First, we create a parameter first. So I've already created a parameter here. I'm just going to edit and show you what I've done. So I called it sales or profit parameter, and it's a string type parameter. And basically you want it to display all the values you want to toggle. In this case, I have sales and profit, but you can have more or less. So we'll keep sales and profit, and we'll click OK. I actually just like to show my parameter so that I know what's going on. So just show the parameter, and let's just leave that there for now. The next thing we want to do is create a calculation that, sort of links with that parameter, so that if I click profit, the calculation will update to profit, and if I click sales, the calculation will update to sales. And so for that, the calculation that you need to do is actually what I just said. So if the parameter is sales, then hey, give me sales. That's what I want. Else profit. So you kind of need to be careful when using else, because else is sort of like a final statement here. I've used it here because we have just sales and profit. But when you have multiple sort of fields or values, you probably want to do else if instead. But we'll be fine with this for now. So just to test that, if we drag sales and profit into the view, you would notice that when I toggle now, the value sort of changes into sales, profit. Great, that works. Now the next calculation that you need to create two calculations, one for profit and one for sales. And basically in the calculation, you put the actual value of the parameter. So we specified in the parameter that we wanted sales and profit. And so for the sales label, we'll put just sales, exactly how it is spelled in your parameter so that you can link it properly. And for the profit label, we'll put just profit. That's all the calculation we need, right? And then, okay, now to build the views. Again, with my lovely trick, I'm going to create two placeholders. Average 0 for 1 point. So this is going to be for the sales, and create another point, which is going to be for the profit. So we have, 2 marks or 2 points there. And so for the first one, I'm going to drag the sales label onto the text. And I'm going to, for the other one, I'm going to drag the profit label onto the text. So meaning that this is for sales and this is for profit. We are almost there. Now, the next thing that we want is to sort of find a way to link it. Now to link it, here comes the parameter actions. So you go to your worksheet, click on actions, and you want to create 2 actions. The first, so add action, change parameter. So the first one is for the sales. So let's say toggle sales. And basically this is our sheet name. I know I named my sheets very badly, but this is the sheet name. And so the parameter we want to target is the sales/profit parameter. And the field we are targeting is the sales label because this is for the sales action. And click OK. Second, the next one, basically the same thing, but this is going to be the toggle for profit. And same logic, we want this parameter, but instead of the sales label this time, we want the profit label. Yeah, that looks okay. And then click OK. So what happens now is when I click on profit, you would see that the parameter here is changing. So currently now it's on profit. When I click on this pane, it sort of changes into sales. And when I click on profit, it changes the parameter value to profit. This is all we need. This is all the magic. And every other thing that is left is, you probably guessed it, formatting. So you want to format that to make sure that it's sort of transparent and we can lay it on top of our chart. And to format, the first thing is we don't want this sales or profit label to show for now. We want to change that into a shape object. I think I'll make this bigger. Yeah, okay. And then I like to use a box. And so, sorry, I'm supposed to change that for everything. So box and the size to the max. Lovely. So now when we click on each of the boxes, we see that it toggles sales and profit. Now, the next thing is that instead of the box, because we want a transparent object that will be able to stay on top of our V's without overclouding it, we would change the shape into a transparent shape. And a transparent shape is a shape that is transparent, but you can easily create a transparent shape with PowerPoint. There are a couple of resources there on how to create transparent shapes. It's nothing too difficult to do, or you can save any transparent shape actually online. So, and take that shape into your shape repository or your shape folder, your Tableau shape folder, and it's here. And I've basically selected that, okay, I want this transparent shape instead. And then I click OK. And then that should change into transparent shapes. So let's see that things are still working. So when I click, sales is still updating. I'm going to remove all the tooltips because we don't want that showing up. Just testing. Yeah, okay. And yeah, everything here, you can remove that, remove all the sort of column dividers and the row divider. And we have, okay, sorry, one more thing to remove, the 0 lines and all the grid lines. Yeah, it's basically a lot of formatting. And now it looks like nothing is there, which is what we want, but because we are the creators, we know that, okay, something is actually going to happen. And at this point, we've created the action, the sheet that we need. And all we need to do is to bring that onto the view. We can actually just drag this. It's kind of the same thing, actually. So just put it on the view. But if you put it on the view, you also remember that all the actions you created in the worksheet, you need to create the same actions on your dashboard. Yeah, Tableau does that thing. So just remember that you need to do that. So basically the same logic, but doing it on the dashboard instead. And so one for sales and one for profit. And okay. And yeah, you have your perfect toggle. Now to make sure that that calculation affects your chart and to sort of add this color identifier, what you want to do is to make sure that instead of all the charts you want affected is using the calculation that you created. So not just sales or profit, you're actually using the sales/profit calculation that is linked to the parameter. And that's how Tableau knows that, okay, I'm going to reference that. And the final bit of juice that I added was to drag the parameter onto the color so that for profit is blue and for sales it is another color. And so yeah, that's it. That's all we've looked at. And just to recap, we've also looked at data, design, and function, and how to use different KPI styles, how you can use the fixed LOD, some formatting tips, quite a number of formatting tips, and how to make your band interactive with parameter actions. And of course, I'm putting some resources here. A lot of resources are out there by the amazing community. The most recent one, I think, is this band designs by Kevin Fledge. You should definitely check that out. It has a video. And Adam McCain is probably the first tutorial I saw about different types of KPIs or bands. So that is definitely worth checking out. A data school blog exists. The button idea, remember that came from Luke Stank, so it's definitely worth checking that out. The parameter action for interactivity, I give all credit of that to Zach, and he has an entire series where it shows like Tableau tips. So I'll definitely recommend checking that out. And the final resource I have here is a blog post by Steve Wexler. I'm a huge fan of Steve Wexler. And yeah, that's also like a very good one if you're looking for other ways or reasons just to use bands. And I've also kept some design inspiration here, because sometimes for you to figure out how to do something in Tableau, you need to figure out what you want to do. And it's always nice to just look at for inspiration in different places. And yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a business style dashboard, you always need inspiration, or I always need inspiration. So I sort of put some resources here. And that brings me to the end of this talk. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer that. Otherwise, yeah, over to you, Sibel or Annabelle, I'm not sure.
Great job. That was awesome. A lot of really great things. Would like to first say out loud, because it's a question we're going to get, and I also want it to be in the recording, that you are planning to make this available in Tableau Public so people can check this stuff out.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, and we'll add that. We can add that to our email. We'll send an email out this week with the recording and any links that either one you or Simon put up. So a couple of questions, and trying to get I think we've got time for a few questions. One I thought was really interesting, and then I'll go to a few that were liked by others. Is there any moment when bands, or even some of the kind of highlighting design things you mentioned, wouldn't work? Are there moments where you should kind of avoid them?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And as with anything about visualization or data, the answer is obviously it depends. So it always depends on the context. One thing that you should keep in mind, especially when in a business context, is that you're not building dashboards for yourself, you're building it for people to use. So always keep like your end user in mind when building this. So yeah, there are different types of dashboards. So there are dashboards where it's just KPIs, you're showing high level summary. There are dashboards that are more operational. So you want to see things that are going on. Actually, you want to see all of the details. You want a specific level of granularity. And for those type of dashboards, sometimes it's just easier to show all of the information. And you obviously don't want 100 bands on your dashboard. It's not going to be effective, or 50. So yeah, it definitely depends on the type of dashboard you're building and who is going to be viewing the dashboard.
Cool. I would totally agree with that. I think I also would say, the thing I try to remind people as well is that don't forget the great thing about visualization is that it's online. So make the dashboard, and if you look at it and it's not helping tell a story, it's not helping people understand the data better, that's a place where you should avoid it, and then you can bring it down. Yeah. One that's again kind of loosely related, but you had a couple of LODs in here, so I think it still fits. Do you have any tips for using LODs with blended data sources? So you've got sales data from two different platforms that need to be viewed together. Yeah. I probably would avoid it, but if you have ideas, I would love to hear them.
Honestly, I would avoid them as well. And also because for me, I'm also always looking for tips on LODs. I stick with the LODs I know, which is fixed and max, etc. But I think it's probably best to avoid it, but don't take my word for it. I wouldn't advise it just because things can get fixed, and especially when you have a lot on your dashboard. For simple dashboard, it might be easier to keep track of, oh yeah, this number looks right. But for bigger dashboards where you have a lot of elements going on, you might make mistakes and unfortunately be reporting the wrong metrics. And if there's no quick way for you to check, that would suck. So I'll probably not use it, or maybe recommend using it when you have a couple of data sources. But again, I would say it depends. And yeah, that's what I can say.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me as well. I think it's an interesting question, and I actually want to go back and even play with even how that might work, but I would probably hold off on that for a second. We talked about the Tableau Public. One question I also found kind of interesting is, would it be easier to upload a custom oval shape? You were showing some of the circles in your design piece for the rounded bar KPI. That way you could change the shape to your custom shape and then change the color and opacity. And do the same thing with the labels.
That is actually brilliant. Why didn't I think of doing that? Like I literally just spent, 5 minutes or 10 minutes building that rounded bar. But I guess it will work. I mean, I can't think of it like a reason right now why it wouldn't work. So I think I should say thank you rather than answering that as a question. Yeah, because I think it might work.
Yeah, this is another one of those it depends kind of moments. I think for sure if it's going to be a more static thing, I think the custom thing becomes a little bit easier versus things where it has to constantly change, or it might change based on certain other dimensions, particularly ones that you build. But yeah, it's a great tool. I would definitely encourage others to think about when to bring in custom shapes versus the other one. I think we might have questions. Well, let me, in the interest of time, I will move forward here. But Zainab, if you have time, there are definitely additional questions in here. Will be great for you to go through the Q&A and take a look at that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to say that I'm always, like you said earlier, I'm kind of always on Twitter when I'm not doing visualization. So feel free to follow me, send me a question, and I'm happy to help, or at least point to a place where you could find resources. And I'm also going to upload this, like you said, all my visualization or all my dashboards are available for download. Feel free to download it, reverse engineer as you like, copy paste, etc. So yeah. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Sharing.
All right, and let me get to move slides a little bit. All right, we've got one more, and this is one. If you've stuck around with us, you are in luck because we were getting some information straight from the source. We've got two of our lovely folks from Tableau here. Jaimie is a product marketing manager focused on AI and ML, the AI and ML portfolio at Tableau. She's been at Salesforce since November of last year, and has been working in the AI space for over, sorry, everything's on top of my labels, over 7 years. Passionate about exploring the Pacific Northwest, trying new restaurants and recipes, and obviously spending time with her family. And before we go forward, we also have Peter, who is a solutions engineer, BI evangelist, and is at Evan BI as well, with 20 years of success guiding and developing business intelligence and analytical systems. He started programming as a part of the Royal Navy, which is awesome, and spent 22 years driving nuclear submarines, and then now restores classic cars. So it has a wealth of experience, and we're really happy to have both Jaimie and Peter here to talk about what's new with Tableau. So I'll let you guys take it over.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Great. So what I'd like to talk about today is our Augmented Analytics category of AI-powered analytics. And this is new in the sense that we've had Ask and Explain data, but now it's open to all viewers. And shortly, Peter, who is a man of many different talents, will be able to dive deeper into the Tableau offering of Ask and Explain data and show you guys some of the live demo. So what I'd like to talk about first is sort of the landscape of where augmented analytics has brought us. And IDC recently ran a report that 83% of CEOs expect to be working in a data-driven organization. On the flip side, though, only 33% of employees are really comfortable diving into data analytics to support their decisions. And so that's clear that there's a pretty big gap in people understanding how to analyze data, except there's a higher mandate for people to be using data. That's why augmented analytics is something we're so passionate in investing in, because it really allows a wider business audience to uncover insights and allow them to access these analytics in context of results that they understand. And what that means is, again, accelerated exploration of data, increased confidence of using their data, and really allowing them to discover what that next business question is and being able to answer that with data and enabling users to uncover those insights that they normally wouldn't be able to discover otherwise. So across our Tableau AI offering, we actually have 3 categories. We have the Augmented Analytics category, and again, that's the easiest to use, and Peter will dive deeper into what those products are. But again, that's really taking ML and using advanced statistics and natural language and smart data prep, and giving the everyday user tools to analyze their data with. We also have business science, and that's a new category we launched last quarter. And what that's about is democratizing our data science techniques so that people are able to make better decisions by using a lot of tools and techniques that were generally reserved for a more kind of coveted data science team. And so that includes intuitive models, operationalizing predictions, and doing what-if scenario planning. Lastly, we also have the data science category, and that's generally for data scientists. And that's using a lot of advanced tools and being able to use integrations and analytics APIs to scale these bespoke models across an organization. So this is a fun analogy that my marketing team really likes to talk about. When we think about data science, business science, and augmented analytics, we like to think of data science as this really precise coordinates. When you think about a data science team, there's a really methodical precision to the way we get to an answer. And our business science category, we think of it in relative to context. So you're still getting to the same destination, but a lot of times you're relying on your own knowledge. So saying, here's the actual coordinates versus take a left, that's next to the cafe, and you're still arriving at the same destination. And lastly, with the augmented analytics, we're doing all that heavy lifting for you. So it's as if you were to type the address into the destination that you're headed right into a rideshare app. So again, to focus more on the augmented analytics section, as we've made a lot of improvements in this quarter to our products, we have ask questions in natural language. So you can see here is a screenshot of Ask Data, where you can type in a business question and then powerful visualizations are generated so you can dive a lot deeper and explore intuitively without having to necessarily even drag and drop the fields and need that extra skill level. And then again, like I was mentioning, you're able to discover insights right in context. So you look for intelligent insights and recommendations, and they're directly surfaced right in your workflow. And lastly, all of this gives business users a lot more confidence in deeper exploration. And again, that's because a lot of times you might not have the analytics training that an analyst would have, but with our tools, everyone now has that skill level. So really quickly, I wanted to talk about some of the 4 key augmented products that we are sharing this quarter and we'll be making developments throughout the rest of the year. So again, Ask Data allows users to ask business questions in plain language, and then you're able to explore your results through data visualizations. We also have Explain Data, and that's really discovering the why behind the value of a data point, so you can dive a lot deeper and understand an explanation. On the Salesforce side, we have Ask Data for Salesforce, and this allows Salesforce users to ask questions right in their CRM data. And similar to Ask Data, it gives you answers in the form of insights, dashboards, and recommendations. And lastly, there's Einstein Discovery for Reports, which lets you discover insights that are powered by automated ML, and they're surfaced directly into your Salesforce reports. So now I'm going to hand it over to Peter, and he's going to dive deep into Ask and Explain Data so you can see it working live.
Thanks, Jaimie. I'm just going to stop you sharing your screen and pull mine up, and we'll go from there. And hopefully everybody can hear my voice okay. Thanks, Annabelle. Okay, so as Jaimie has just been saying, what we're talking about today is Tableau's augmented analytic features, which are usable by everybody within an organization, whether they be a creator, an explorer, or now a viewer. And what this does is it enables what we call analytical ubiquity across the enterprise. And this is really important because There are an awful lot of people who love to work with Tableau and love to get deep and down into the weeds with Tableau. And some of the demos that we've seen today have been really, really great. But there are other users within businesses that aren't really data analysts. They're not business scientists, but they want to actually investigate the data. And there's a problem. That problem is lowering the barrier of entry into being able to actually work with the data. We're all still learning with Tableau. And I loved in the fact that even Simon and Zanbia were actually talking about the fact that they're still learning. And that's great because Tableau is one of those tools you still have to learn. The problem is business analysts don't have the time to learn, especially executives. They definitely don't have the time to learn, but they want to be able to answer questions from a dashboard. So how do we enable them? Well, the augmented analytics, and just a little query here, augmented analytics, by the way, is not the case of automation. Augmented analytics is about actually helping a human by enhancing their capabilities. It's not about replacing the human. And I need to get that point across because everybody says, oh no, AI and ML, I'm going to lose my job. No, you're not. Augmented analytics is about making you better at what you do. So if you're an executive and you have a question to answer, augmented analytics can help you do that. And what I'm going to show here is I'm going to go into role and I'm going to do a little bit of role play on this screen. And we're looking at an executive overview about profitability for Superstore. And I'm going to switch now and I'm going to go to become Jim Kirk. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to tell you I'm Trekkie and a Star Wars fan. So Jim Kirk is the executive vice president of sales for Superstore. And he gets a phone call this morning and it's from his CEO. And CEO, affectionately known as Bones, goes, hey, Jim, we've got a problem here. I can see a problem with Colorado, but I don't know what it is. And Jim goes, okay, I can have a look at that for you, Bones. I'll dig into the dashboard now and we'll see what we can get. And he immediately dives in. And the first thing he sees, and you can see it here, is Colorado is showing minus 20% profitability. Not good for any stores, even in COVID times. So we really need to investigate this. And he goes, okay, well, I can see that there's minus 20%, but I don't really understand why. I can't see anything on the rest of the dashboard that actually points to this point. I can't see if there's a difference in sales. It's a bit unclear to me. So what we do is we provide them or provide Jim with the capability of using explained data. And explained data, as Jaimie said, is the way that augmented machine learning and AI is used to try and help an executive or a business analyst to understand why they're seeing what they're seeing on the mark. So here I click on Colorado. I basically get the tooltip up. I can see that there's a problem with Littleton. If I want to actually dig in deeper, if I go to the light bulb here, and yes, we're all talking about light bulbs going off, and here goes the light bulb. And what that actually does is it explodes out to the right-hand side and explain data pane. And that pane actually provides more interest on what we're looking at. So Colorado, it's an explain mark. It's just been run. We've run an explanation set behind the scenes for linear regression and a number of other couple of machine learning products. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, profit ratio, minus 20%. That's actually lower than expected. Okay, why? Well, if we expand this piece, we can see different variations that are actually telling us what that may be. So I've got a relevant dimension, and the dimension may be contributing to profit ratio for off it profitable. So let's see the explanation and try and understand why. So you can see here that Jim is being guided to try and understand why Colorado has a negative dimension. And here it's actually telling him this is a dynamic viz built on the fly directly into the dashboard for the executive to try and understand. The distribution of records by order profitable. This chart shows how the explain mark for Colorado has different distribution of values across order profitable compared to the distribution of values across order profitable as a whole for the visualization. And you can see in the gray, normally it would be 79% plus, but for the mark, it's actually only 58% profitable. Okay, so what's driving that? Well, again, if we look at order profitable, the unprofitable piece, there's only 21% of orders that are unprofitable across the organization, but for some reason, there's 42% for Colorado. Okay, so what else may be affecting this? Well, it might be a problem with the profit. Okay, let's have a quick look at profit. Yeah, we can see immediately there's a profit problem here because Colorado is showing minus 20%, and the top earners are showing plus 34%. So what else could be pulling into that? Well, discount might not be helping either. So we look at the discount piece here, and we can actually see directly that discount is actually showing the same problem, but it's showing the reverse. The average discount for Colorado is 31%, where the top earners are only showing an actual discount of less than 0% in some, but mainly 2%. So Jim goes, okay, I need to dig deeper, and I need to understand where these actual figures are coming from, and I need to look at the city. But I can't go to this dashboard. I can't pull it to that level. There's nothing on that dashboard that gives me that variation. So what we can then do is move into what we call Ask Data. And Ask Data, as Jaimie has said, is a natural language processed query engine designed around our analytical engine, which allows a user to ask a standard question in business speak and get back an actual view. So if I dig into Ask Data, just by clicking here, it's based directly in the dashboard, and the user can then start to search. And I'm going to come out of Jim's capability and just show you something very clever. If I just type T, I get everything that T is referred to within this data set. So it could be a territory, which is classed as a region. It could be a town, which is classed as a city. It could be days to ship actual, which is a number. It could be a limit filter of top. It could be an aggregation of total. It could be a calculation of times, or it could be an actual value of Texas, Tennessee, Troy, which are all in different fields. What this is showing is how we guide a user to the result that they're looking for. And that user being guided enables that to actually work in a better way. So we're talking about Jim again, and he's looking for this value. So we'll just do a quick search. We'll go into the tool, we'll go backspace, and we'll just go, okay, I want to see sales, profit ratio, profit, discount, spell right, by city for Colorado. Oh, hang on, what have I done wrong? Oh, I forgot to put the title. There we go. No, it's still not in. So it's guiding me to the question. It's saying me, oh, okay, city for Colorado in state. Okay, so let's just go and go, okay, let's just try it by Colorado. No, it's still not saying. What I'm trying to show you here is the user gets guided to the correct area. So we can come back out, we can clear all, and we can just start digging into this if we want. So I can go sales by Colorado. And this will give me that value, and it gives me an immediate case. I can then start digging in and say, okay, but I want to also say profit ratio or profit. So if I take profit in here, it's giving me the sum of profit. So I'm now getting a scatter graph. I may actually want to look at profit ratio as well. And you can see how it's actually building up the query for me so that I can see what I want. And then I want to actually investigate discount. And I've got discount coming online. And what we're trying to do now is actually trying to understand what the value is. Oh, hang on a minute, we need towns. So by city. Ah, what it's saying is I've got a spelling in there, incorrect. Again, by city, and we can break down this field. And now we're actually getting somewhere because we can actually see that Denver has a very good discount on this. But the places that we're seeing, Louisville has discount, but has a very poor profit ratio. So in this way, Jim can actually investigate the data, not by actually asking the report team to build him a new report, but by actually going directly to the dashboard using Ask Data and investigating that query himself. What this does is it branches out Tableau's use to a wider audience. But those wider audiences are actually guided and helped to understand the questions that they're asking, the data set that they're using, and therefore they can build on that in their learnings and actually provide better questions as they move forward. And one of the things that happens with that is if you use Ask Data and you actually go to the base, you can actually build as creators standard questions for them. So you can build complex date and time areas, and you can go, give me my orders as a year-over-year percentage. And you can see that visualization is brought back straight away. Or I can go to a filter and I can filter, say, count of orders between 44 cents and 22,000, and it's giving me the number of orders. And these are all pre-built visualizations, which allow the user to then start diving into this. So for instance, if I go to clear all, and I go back to my basic data analysis, and I go number of orders by region, I can actually change this because I can go to region here, and I can actually say, I don't want to do region, maybe I want to do state, and I can accept it. And I will actually change that visualization directly from the filter within the tool. Right, I know we're coming up to time, so I'm going to stop the demonstration there and stop my sharing. And if there are any questions, we can take them, or Jaimie can actually work with them as me. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Peter. Really helpful, and lots of people found a lot useful. Can you talk a little bit about, there's a few questions around what version this is for, and how do people access these cool features?
Okay, so Ask Data, as you just saw it for viewers, is in 2021.2, which has just been released. Ask Data has actually been in Tableau since 2019.3. And Explain Data has been in since 2020.2. And they are usable for creators and explorers in those versions. And basically, the way you access them is Ask Data is enabled on datasets by default. You go to the dataset and you can see Ask Data directly there. If you want to put it into a dashboard before 2021.2, you need to add it as a container inside a floating container on the dashboard, and then create a hidden button for it, which will expose it, but that will expose it directly for the data set underneath. One of the things that needs to be taken into consideration is the ability to actually curate the data set to make it viable for your business users. And in 2021.2, we've actually involved something called lenses, which allow you to build a number of views across a common data set for different business teams.
Peter, I wanted to jump in. I saw a question earlier and people were asking, with all of these new augmented tools coming out, does that make the data analyst role less important? And I think you talking and touching on lenses shows how important, if anything, the data analyst is. Could you speak a little bit
Jaimie.
more about that role?
Yeah, I would agree. So it doesn't make the data analyst role any less deprecated. In fact, I would actually agree with Jaimie totally. It improves the connectivity between the business teams and makes the data analyst role even more important. The data curation, the ability to build out a set of data that is directly relatable to a business unit, is very important. And I've worked with a couple of very large enterprises where we've taken one data set and actually made 7 or 8 different lenses for the actual business units within that team. And prior to that, you had to make 7 or 8 different data sets available because you had to curate each one. And by curation, what I'm talking about is creating cinnamons and a different ontology, because the data set is based on a standard data set with a semantic knowledge that actually Tableau applies to it, but the ontology is what the users apply on top of that to make fields recognizable by a business user when they're actually typing a question. And that is all the data analyst's role.
Thank you. I would love to go ahead and start to wrap up on that note, because I think that's a really important point, and really kind of why, you know, this tug exists, is to help people use all of the great features of the platform in interesting ways, but also continuing to leverage the power of human intelligence as much as platform intelligence. So thank you both for that. All right, just a couple of things. There's only a few minutes left, but I only need a couple of them. if you enjoyed this and love the speakers, we would love to hear other people that you would, love to hear from. If one of them is you, feel free to, you can use this QR code to apply to present, but also feel free to reach out to us anywhere that makes sense to you, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, via email. If there are speakers that, are not you, but you would love to hear from them, we're happy to look into those individuals and see if they're available to come into our group. As Annabelle mentioned, we're going to take a bit of a summer holiday, and we will be back and raring to go in September. That page is already up, so I'll leave this QR code up for a couple of seconds. Around the same time, this will be, if for those in the US, the week after Labor Day week. And I'm sure others have that bank holiday as well. But otherwise, we really appreciate you all for coming out, and have a great rest of your Monday.